we know that the story of 2015 is very likely to be defined by one photograph, I would imagine, that shocking, terrible picture of 3-year-old little Aylan Kurdi. We're having this discussion about saving lives at sea under the broad theme of the conference, understanding failure, adjusting practice. And there is perhaps a particular burning question we have of European Union member states about their responsibilities as duty bearers in the context of that little boy's death and the struggles of many more refugees like him who have needed to take the decision to make those perilous journeys. I've just got back from Calais, where my organisation, Doctors of the World, is working. If ever there were a looming case study about failure by European Union member states to prevent and also to respond to a humanitarian crisis of the first order within the European Union, I'm sorry to say it is Calais. But I want to turn the panel to Ameen, who's going to tell us something about his remarkable journey. Well, in fact, he told me not just one journey, really remarkable, one of the most inspiring people I've met for a very long time. We're really looking forward to hearing your intervention. After Ameen, I'm going to come to you. It's been a long, productive day. We really want to hear from you your initial observations and questions about this topic, learning from failure, adjusting practice in the context of the rescue at sea missions underway. But first, let's hear from Ameen about what it's like to go through those journeys.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody. I am Ameen Mando. I'm 20 years old. I'm from Syria, from Damascus. And I was working in oil company as a human resource, but I decided to leave Syria and go out of Syria to Libya because the place where I was working, it's now under control IS, and I have my brother and my uncle in Libya. For that, I want to go to place I have some support to start again. Then from Libya, I go to Libya and I stay there for like almost a year. Then my friend, they are doctors and they decide to go out from Libya because Libya, its situation, it's not good to live, especially when you have familia, especially when you have children. And for that, when you have children, it's the school, the education is almost nothing, and it's not safe a place for children also or for women. We have a lot of problem there in Libya. For that, they decide to take a boat and go to Italy, then continue the way to Europe. We take the boat in 2030. In 11 October, it was our boat in October. And we have the accident. There is boat follow us, and he don't come to make us back to Libya. He just come, they want to kill the people, and he drop some rope to stop the engineering working. Then in the end, he have a machine gun and he starts shooting the boat. And after he follow us like for 4 hours, then he say, okay, continue your way, but already our boat, he have a lot of problem, and we stay with this boat after he shoot the boat, and he hurt 4 people, as I remember, there is 4 people. And then after 12 hours, our boat turned around in the water. And the Italian government and the Maltan government, they send the boat to save us. But before this boat to coming, I think there is military boat. He sent some life jacket and some small boats to help the people. And then they start take the people, and we stay in the water like for between 5 to 6, 7 hours in the water. Then they save us and they take us to 2 parts. One part to Malta, it's almost 150 people, and the another part, it's like 60 people, as I remember. 60 people to Italy. And the problem was there is some kinder, they go with the Italian boat, and the familia, it was in Malta. Here also, they celebrate the family also. It's big problem because children, they stay alone in Italy. And from Italy, I continued the way, from Malta, sorry. We thank the government of Malta and Italy to save us. Okay, this is what they can do. And the situation in Malta for the people, it was very good, but the situation in the camp is not perfect, but this is what they can offer for us. And then we continue our way. Like me, I continue my way to Germany, to Hamburg, and I am now living in Hamburg. Okay.
Let's see if this works. Thank you, Ameen. And if I may, just before we, thank you. Just before we move on, because there's also another very remarkable part of your story, which I know you're happy to tell, because it continues after Hamburg. Tell us something about that.
About Athena?
Yes.
Yeah. And from almost 1 week, I was in Athena. My mother and my sister and my friend, they take a boat from Turkish to Athena, and I was there, and I continued the way as a new refugee again. I had my passport, and I continued the way from Athena, from Griechenland, to Macedonia, Serbia, Croatia, then again to Austria, then to Hamburg. And all the way, we thank all the people in the way, especially Macedonia, Serbia, even Hungary. In the past, she was not good, but now they're dealing with the people very good. But because they put the military and the police in all the way to protect the people and to continue your way, and all the way you find some people, civilian people or volunteer, they support you, like they give you some food, they support you too if you need something, and we thanks for that. But only the problem it's in, I don't know if I can speak about Croatia. Okay, we have only problem in Croatia. The camp in Croatia, it's outside the camp, it's different what inside, because outside there is Red Cross, there is a lot of volunteer, there is Human Without Border, everything is good, but when you go inside the camp, it's different situation. No food, no nothing, you must sleep in the floor, nothing. And it's not good for children and women, and for some people if he is sick, there is nothing inside this camp. And some people, they stay like for 4 days inside this camp. For that, if someone he can go inside this camp, it will be great. And especially I want to thank Austria, because the military in Austria and the police, they was very, very friendly, and they try to help the people in any way. If you want to stay in Austria, they take you to the camp. If you don't, they give you the food, and they give you everything, and they support you to continue your way. And for that, vielen Dank, or thanks very much for Austria. Thank you.
And before we hand off, because I have one more question. So imagine, I mean, you took the decision to leave because you had to. You survived the capsize of the boat at sea, and you were adrift in the water for something like 5 or 6 hours. Imagine, a boat came and then left, and then you were transported to Malta, and you made it here. And then family arrive in Athens. You go to Athens, and then you make the journey back again to Hamburg. That's really, really quite remarkable. And then you are a professional person in Damascus, and I know that you never imagined that you would ever find yourself to be a refugee. Tell us something about that.
Yes, I never imagined I will be as a refugee, but some people feel like it's shame or something about he is refugee now, but for me, it's okay, because I don't decide to be a refugee, because I don't decide to start this war in Syria. But the best way to prove for these people that we deserve to be here, and all this help, like when I continue study and continue my life and work for this. I am in Germany now, I'm in Hamburg. When I continue my work and do something for Germany, this will be best answer for all the people. They say we don't need refugee, or they feel something bad about this. For me, no, it's okay, because it's not my decision. Yeah.
Very good. Well, thank you for sharing your story.
Welcome.
Thank you. Okay, let's hand over then to Alessandra, and we're very privileged because Alessandra has very kindly agreed to share with us some data from the Mare Nostrum rescue mission at sea, which I think is going to be extremely illuminating. You will remember, controversially, it was the rescue mission that was terminated after that came under some considerable political pressure. So bear in mind the questions you might wish to pose about that. Alessandra.
First of all, thank you for the invitation. It's a privilege to stay here with you. Yes, I decided to share with you some data and some consideration about the Mare Nostrum operation, because it was the first one wide organized search and rescue operation. And I want to start from some legal point. I'm a medicine doctor, so I apologize if my when I talk about law, I'm not completely confident, but just to give you the picture, you see in the green boxes it's written a foreigner who is denying his country is our constitution, the Italian constitution, that say that people have the right to ask for the international protection. More or less all the constitution of all the country in Europe say the same. If someone is persecuted, can ask for international protection. Then there is down the illegal immigrants. I don't like illegal, but it's written in the law of in the Italian law. That is a very good point, because it's written that if you try to cross the border in a regular way, not complying with the rules, you could be rejected or deported. Quite normal, but in the Italian law it's also written you cannot be expelled if you are in need of rescue. That we have, of course, a border with the sea, but we have also a border with the land. So if you are in need of rescue, if you are in need, you must be rescued before to be deported. It is a very good point, because allow us to provide humanitarian assistance when people arrive. In Malta, I apologize if there is some Maltese here, but it's not his fault. In Malta, when you arrive, you are in need, but I mean, if I'm not wrong, when you arrive after the ship was capsized, you have been detained. The reception center in Malta are the detention center. They are closed. I don't like to use detained center, but they are close. You cannot move from the center. So that kind of rules that say we must protect and rescue people are not the same in Europe. The third square is the SAR Convention, International Convention, Search and Rescue International Convention, that say that all the nations that sign that convention must ensure the assistance to any person in distress of the sea, regardless of the nationality. I cannot choose to save someone that comes from Spain, but not the one that comes from Egypt. Regardless of the status, they have a document or not, and regardless of the circumstances in which this person is found. Just to be clear, if you are 200 people in a boat that can bring just 50 people, you are taking a risk. Following the rules of the convention, regardless of the fact that you decide to take this risk, you are in a dangerous position, and I have the duty to help you. This is our interpretation, what we have. We want to read this rule. Frontex, Triton, say, if you are 200 in a boat and you take a risk, it's your own problem. When the water started to get inside of the boat, made a call. That is a little bit different, you can understand, because if I see that a boat is overcrowded, I started to be worried. Frontex, wait, to be worried, that you say, please, I have the water inside of the boat, it can be dangerous. This is a different approach from the same rules, but the SAR Convention, SAR International Convention, has been signed not only from Italy, but from Italy, Malta, Spain, Greece, and so on. I cannot give you all the list. So what's happened between 2010 2013 and 2014. In your mind, people arrived in Lampedusa. It was true until 2012, the beginning of 2013. Then people, instead to arrive in Lampedusa, started to arrive directly in Sicily. The picture is quite easy. The route is made by me. It's not so nice to see, but give you the idea of the difference in the distance. And people died, and we started to see the dead body. If I ask you how many shipwrecks we had in 2013, I'm sure you answered one, the 3rd of October, 386 people died. It's true, but you remember that because you have seen the picture on the movie, on the newspaper, whatever, of the dead body. That was the CNN effect, has been called this morning. I'm not sure that you remember that after 10 days, there was another shipwreck, the one of Ameen, in which a lot of people was died, but they are still under the water. We didn't see them, and we forgot them. So the problem became big, became evident, because we saw the bear. Do you remember in Lampedusa, no? The 5 white bear and all the other? So the situation was this one. People started to arrive in Sicily instead of Lampedusa during 2003. When I proposed this picture in Italy, it's always a problem. Lampedusa is Sicily, of course, but I have to divide people that arrive directly in Lampedusa and people that instead arrive directly in Sicily. And you see that from 2013, the red column started to be bigger than the green one. Mare Nostrum started the 18th of October after the 2 shipwrecks with a clear mandate. It was managed from the Italian government. 2 mandates: the safeguard of the life of the sea and contrast smuggling and traffic. With an active search is the thinking that I was telling you before. Using the radar to find the ship that could be in difficult, not just waiting. They use the helicopter, they use the drone, they use the technological system to find people that could be in difficult. And Mare Nostrum finished 31 October, 1 year and some days later. We was involved, so just to give you the idea that the protection of the life was done also ensuring the presence of doctor, of Minister of Health. So it was not just a humanitarian organization like mine, Italian Red Cross, but it was a formal involvement of the Ministry of Health that sent doctor on this ship. The discussion was this one, these 3 questions. Is the operation encouraging the arrival of migrants? Does the Mare Nostrum operation convince migrants to make the decision to leave? What do you think? Do you want to come in Italy? Oh, there is the Mare Nostrum operation. It's easier. We can move. That's the politicians' questions, what they pose. But we had 2 hours of TV debate on these questions. Should the migrants be left without the security of being picked, bustle, and so on? But you know, because I showed you before, that the increase in migratory flow started before Mare Nostrum. Mare Nostrum was a reaction. And also, when we are talking people coming from Eritrea, from Syria, they are not people that started the journey 1 month before they arrival in Italy. We have people that started 2 years before, 6 months before. So they started before the beginning of the Mare Nostrum. So it was not the origin of the migratory flow. It was an answer of the migratory flow. Some data. 535 4 events in more or less 400 days. It means more than 1 event each day. 60 major health intervention. I'm a medicine doctor, I apologize, I usually focus on this. With the transportation of the people in the hospital, or the major intervention has been undertaken directly on the ship, but the ship that we are talking about are the Italian Navy, the big one. There are people that has been arrested with a lot of problem because they has been arrested in the international water. So the Italian government have the competencies for the persecution of these people. A lot of debate, but the Strasbourg court say yes, put them in jail. Ship captured, the most remarkable are the 5 mothership, the one very big that keep people in the international water and leave them with a very small one that can capitalize very quickly. Frontex replaced Mare Nostrum, and the competences of Frontex is the blue line near the coast of Italy. You see? The very, very close line. It was not the big portion of the Mediterranean Sea, but it was the small and close portion of sea near Mare Nostrum. I don't want to say more. I just would like to give you this picture. Mare Nostrum was not a solution. Mare Nostrum could reduce, but all the effort to stay on the sea could reduce the risk that the people take to move. But the question, from my point of view, is why they have to take this risk? Why I have to stay on the shore of the Italian coast with all my volunteers, with all the other organizations, keeping them out of the water? The people that are lucky to arrive there, instead to start to think that we should avoid that the people have to take this kind of risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Alessandra, very much indeed. And I know that you've also been giving a lot of attention to the reception of unaccompanied children as part of your work. I wonder if you say a brief word about that for us, please.
Yes, last year in Italy we received 170,000 people by sea, and more or less 12,000 are unaccompanied minors. They are not children, they are minors, and minors for the Italian law. The age range is between 15 and 18, because at 18 they are aged for the Italian law, and they are unaccompanied. There are a lot of children, but usually children are with the parents, maybe just one, but with the parents. So the problem, the real challenge is the reception of these people, because they are really vulnerable, because they have the right to stay in Italy, to go to school, to receive the paper. But what we know, and I'm sure that you have the same kind of experience, that when a guy leave home and mom say, go in Germany because there is your uncle that can find you a job, or because you can find a substitute of your family there because there is your community, they want to go there. So even if we try to explain that they can stay, they have the right of the document, they have the right to be treated as the Italian guys, they prefer to move, and they are the most vulnerable among the trail.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. So we've heard something about the survival of a perilous journey, capsize at sea. States begin to assist, supported by their auxiliary National Red Cross Society. Any reflections, observations, or comments on what you've heard so far? Anything take you by surprise, shock you, not surprise you? Here, just here, yes, please. Microphone coming.
I was just looking at your presentation and it doesn't work, so I try to speak up. And it was interesting to see this line of sort of Frontex influence and control on the Mediterranean, and it was also interesting to see that they have a mandate to help people just next to Libya, but they don't have this mandate to do it in the middle of the Mediterranean. But my question is to you, like, how do you see Frontex role currently? And as we before had countries in Europe having agreements with governments with Gaddafi, Mubarak, and all this sort of governments to prevent people from crossing Mediterranean, and people were prevented by different regimes in the Mediterranean from crossing. Do you see anything similar going on now? Is there any sort of reach out to Turkey, for example, to try to prevent people from coming? Because, this would be expected tendency. So, just any observation of what is going right now with Frontex in it?
I think that Frontex do his own job. Is an agency for the protection of the border. That's the point. So Frontex protects the border. We can discuss if we need in Europe an agency that spend money or to invest money to protect the border. But Frontex do its job, okay? That is the point. So the commitment of Mare Nostrum and the commitment of Frontex was different. Now the situation is a little bit changed from my last picture. They started to have a more large control of the water. About the prevention of the migration, I think that before the 2011, people moved less people, but we receive a lot of people as well. We have people in Italy now that are working in the Italian Red Cross that was escaped from Eritrea in 2001. But in 2001, Eritrea was a place that people want to escape. Libya was not. In the Arabic Spring, we received people that was living in Libya, but that was coming from Nigeria, from Sudan, because it was the north of the continent. It was the, let me say, maybe it's not completely correct, but it was the rich country. People moved from their own country, going in Libya, because in Libya it was easy to find a job. I'm right? When the situation in Libya collapsed, people started to move. So now I think that the smuggler, the trafficking of people is the major activities that give the major income in Libya. Tunisia is trying to do something. We receive definitely less boat from Tunisia than the previous year. And I stop here.
Thank you very much. Very good. Two questions in one. Yes, just here.
I'm new to Europe because I lived in the US and I worked with a lot of traffic minors as an immigrant living in the US too. We share similar issues with very different complex realities due to borders and the collective group of countries together. But I think it's becoming more and more emerging, the issue of human trafficking and unaccompanied minors too, that the Pope was just in DC and he was addressing the issue of human trafficking. And I think the international community at large is going to continue to As humanitarian issues continue to grow and women and children are in the most vulnerable groups, we, as an international community overall, we're gonna have to address this in a much more drastic way eventually. And I don't know how the US and Europe can vent or try to exchange, because are two different realities. My reality of working with immigrant survivors of human trafficking was very different than people who are working here, and I'm learning more about it. But I think that will continue to grow, and it's definitely going to be something that the international community has to address drastically before it takes to a different level as well. And I would love, you've shared a lot, but I don't know if you have anything that you can think of long-term goals, or what could be some effort solution to the cause.
I think we're in broad agreement on the panel, and we look forward to you hosting us at the Washington Humanitarian Congress this time next year. One more before we move on, because we have many, many other things. Any other quick reflections? Something burning? No. Save it, because we'll come to it. So then we move on to Aurélie, our colleague from Médecins Sans Frontières. So we see the ending of Mare Nostrum, which opens the way for NGOs to take that space, as it were. And MOAS, that incredible naval operator, steps in and is then joined by Médecins Sans Frontières. Tell us that story.
Yes, thank you very much. I think Alessandra did a very good presentation to introduce the situation that we were faced with at the end of last year. For Médecins Sans Frontières, it was, of course, not a new situation. We've been faced with the needs of people arriving by sea since we started working in Lampedusa in 2002. And we were always very frustrated because as a medical humanitarian organization, our objective is to decrease mortality and morbidity. And we had no impact on mortality because we were only treating the survivors, those lucky enough to make it to Italian shores. So it has been for many years that we've been discussing what role we could play at sea. And of course, the sea is not a usual humanitarian space. We didn't have the expertise. We didn't have guarantees to be able to disembark people that are rescued at sea. That has been for many years until Mare Nostrum was launched. And one of the main difficulties for this type of operations that neither Italy nor Malta actually accepted people to disembark. So there was a lot of difficulties. There were legal issues as well. How do you make sure you're not accused to facilitate irregular migration? There was a lot of discussions over can we do it without causing more harm? To make sure that we don't put people in greater risk. So that was the discussion we had at the end of last year until the launch of the operations in May this year. And clearly the Mare Nostrum operation played a big role, and also the start of the operation from MOAS actually played a big role to show that it was possible. And clearly, this type of operation are not. It's not a problem of resources. Resources are there. We can do it. Everyone can do it. States have the means and the resources to do it. It was a lack of political willingness. And until May, it was politically incorrect to do search and rescue because Mare Nostrum was labeled at the end of the year as a pull factor, and the European Union refused to fund it because of that reason. And of course, one of the main concern that we have doing this type of operation is that, as Alessandra mentioned, it's not the solution. Search and rescue cannot be a solution to boat migration, to dangerous migration journeys. People should not have to be in distress to be brought to Europe. And that's the tragic situation and absurd situation we are seeing today, with people forced to be in distress to be allowed into Europe. These type of operations have been very intense for the organization. I mean, all the people I met who have been on those boats have always talked about the intensity of the fear people feel when they are on these boats during the rescue. They are very dangerous operations. Things can go bad very quickly. They are not a solution because people continue to die. People can die during rescue. That's a very perilous operation. You have to realize those boats are unseaworthy. They can never make it to Italian shores. They don't have enough fuel. They are very bad quality boats. They are overcrowded. People are packed on each other in these boats. They don't have any navigation equipment. They only have a sat phone to call the Coast Guard. That's the only thing they have. And very few people have actually life jackets. And the life jackets they have are very bad quality and will not save them. So rescue is not the solution, but it's the only thing that can save their lives. They have to be rescued. Another, so the team were saying, you know, the intensity of that operation, of the fear people feel, of the difficulty of bringing them back to the boat, and then the intensity of the joy that people, the relief people feel when they arrive on these boats, and that have been very strong for all teams. They have all talked about the humanity in the operation and the fact that we cannot reduce these people, someone like Ameen, as numbers on a map of number of arrivals, number of deaths, number of people who will get asylum in Europe or not, refugees versus migrants, numbers to be relocated, numbers to be resettled. They are people. They have people with human needs. And then something that we don't talk about enough is that people don't only die at sea because of shipwrecks. They also die during the journey because of other experiences. You have, we know more or less now the number of people who drown because there are reports. Of course, I think these numbers are still unreported. This year we are still at 3,000 deaths, which is still too much. We will never know how many people died before even departing from Libya. Many people die in the desert. Many people die in detention centers in Libya. And people die as well before being rescued. They die from asphyxia inside the boat. They die from different medical conditions linked to the difficulty of the journey, from hypothermia, from dehydration. So it shows the absurdity of the situation and the fact that we cannot rely on search and rescue to solve the migration, the boat migration. Something else also that we faced with this operation is of course the lack of response from the European Union. Today the answer is still focusing on keeping people away, and I think one very good example is the EU NAVFOR Med military operation that has been launched this week, that aims at preventing people from leaving the shores by cutting the smuggling business. And of course the smugglers are not nice people. They are abusing very vulnerable people, and we see the result of the violence people suffer and the bad conditions that they suffer in Libya. But cutting the smuggling business is cutting the only exit routes these people have. And blocking them in Libya cannot be the solution. What will happen to these people in Libya? I mean, there are many reports of the situation in Libya, human rights violation, people abused in detention centers, and so on. So, of course, the EU has launched Frontex. So it has been, a way to replace Mare Nostrum, but it's in no way replacing Mare Nostrum. And the response so far is still very ad hoc, because there's no organization that has the mandate to do search and rescue. It's only based on the law of the sea and the obligations of vessels in the zone to respond to distress calls. And the problem is that with the situation we're facing today, with this type of boats, with the number of boats departing, you cannot rely on the law of the sea, on having the luck to have a boat nearby that can answer to the distress call. You need to be proactively searching and as close as possible to departure points, which today is not the response that exists. In practice, member states have sent military vessels that are doing that. Some of them have been only sent for a few weeks, then stopped. Frontex is not supposed to patrol close to Libya shores. They are only supposed to patrol 138 nautical mile away from Sicily. So it's basically only the Maltese search and rescue zone. In practice, they are actually moving much further because they have no choice. If they want to show results, then that's where they need to be. But this response is still completely ad hoc, and from one day to the next, then Frontex can say, our geographical scope is there, and we stay there, which is a big problem because our experience shows that you cannot do that. People will really, the number of deaths will increase if we are not actively searching in the zone where most of the incidents happen. And then lately, the response of the EU has been, of course, focusing on releasing pressure on the states that are receiving most of these people, but so in forms of hotspots, so EU support to reception systems, relocation, which is a new thing, which in a way is good because it can prevent a dangerous trip across Europe, like the trip Ameen was talking about across the Balkan countries. But people still need to risk their life to reach Europe, and today there are still no meaningful alternatives to these boat journeys. So people still have to cross irregularly. The reason why we so many people that are using the sea to reach Europe and then are risking their lives is because the land borders are closed. The fences have been built in all land borders, the external borders of the EU. There is a fence between Greece and Turkey. There is a fence between Bulgaria and Turkey. There is no fence between Hungary and Serbia. So we are basically pushing people towards the sea, and though we have the challenge to respond to this type of challenges, is it the role of humanitarian NGOs to do search and rescue? I don't think so. I think states should fulfill their obligations and provide first safe and legal alternatives so that people don't have to take those journeys, and second, deploy ambitious rescue at sea mechanisms so that people are brought to shore safely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was incredibly rich, and I think we all really appreciate the insight you shared on some of the struggles that MSF faced in deciding to participate. And you touched, Aurélie, on the responsibility of states to protect and assist. And now we come to Barbara, who is a member of the European Parliament, has just returned literally from Tunisia, so we're looking forward to hearing something about what you've seen and witnessed there, Barbara. And I know you have a particular interest in the intersection between human rights and foreign policy, and in this context, that's absolutely fascinating. And we'll get you to perhaps answer some burning questions about what more our elected representatives can do to tackle some of these issues. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. So as a politician, of course, I look at the EU policies we have, and that builds very much on what all of you have said. I mean, before Mare Nostrum started, our European border policy has come to the situation that the Mediterranean became the most deadliest border in the world. I would say it's a complete collapse of policy if we have this record. Now the figures went down, because more ships, also military ships who are in the Mediterranean, as Alessandra said, are rescuing people. But politically, we have not solved and have not reached a majority in the parliament, but also not amongst member states. We need a European sea rescue operation, which is permanent. Because what we have after Mare Nostrum was only a step in of the border agency Frontex with no mandate to actively research people. The only thing what we have reached is that they now answer to the signals from boats. Before, they didn't even answer. So I think here the policy completely failed. We had some weeks ago, those of you who follow the European media, perhaps you took note of this, the Commission President Juncker presented to us in the Parliament a whole new plan how to deal with refugees and migration. It was a very good speech. For a change, he said that Europe is a history each member state has a history of running away because of poverty and being happy that we could, because of dictatorships or because of fascism, have been received in other areas. So we should remember our history and learn for current policies. So it was good. It's also good that the German Chancellor accepted a lot of refugees in. But if we look into the whole plan of what we do with the border, with our EU borders, it did not shift at all. It doesn't shift at all. Because the main drive behind the policies we still carry out and we give more budget to and we give more thinking to is still to build a fortress Europe. And that's absolute in contradiction because everybody, regardless in which party, must see that this fortress Europe has not led to fewer refugees, it has led to a lot of refugees who came here under terrible situations. Now, what do we have in this? We have the situation, which was also mentioned, that political leadership says we want to rescue or we want to save lives at our border. Therefore, we fight the smugglers. Now, we do this in 3 phases. Phase 1 is over with exchanging data. Phase 2, our German parliament agreed just last week to it. It means military boats, and also I think we sent 950 German soldiers on that mission. We stop boats, we search boats, we ask if there are smugglers and refugees to turn in their boats and rescue the refugees. Now, each soldier, I think, and perhaps also some civil rescue people, they know what that means. That could mean also that the smugglers, as they did in the past, individually start shooting. And now what do we do in protecting, saving lives? Firing back? So this is not thought through. Even then comes phase 3. Phase 3 means not only operating in international waters, but going into the territory of Libya, because it's so that most of the boats start from Libya. This is not possible by international law, so the European Union has asked the Security Council for a Mandate 7. Today, we have a decision by the 2 parliaments, basically, in Libya to agree to a declaration to form a government of unity. If this continues, then we will soon have an invitation from the Libyan side to the European Union, yes, please fight by military means in the Libyan territory, the smugglers. This is far from solving anything, because in Libya we have only fighting factors. Militia, political groups, tribes, they're all warriors, I would say. No much other capacities for political solutions. And now we add an international military component to it. And my question is, and for whom I don't get an answer, it's the same, I think, what Alessandra said. Why do the refugees have to take the risk? And why do we in Europe not open more legal channels to cross this Mediterranean Sea or the land borders? And this is part of the new policy now. It is in the text, but it is not developed. So we say, yes, we could give more humanitarian visa. I even would say, why do Eritreans need an individual visa to come? Because we don't deport them back. The situation at home is so miserable. Why do they at all have to have a visa? Why do they have the Syrians a visa? Why can't they not just go to the embassies, get a kind of a humanitarian visa for half a year and come here without risk? We should give more for family reunification and so that the people can come, and we should have more of the resettlement. But on all these policies, our 28 member states cannot agree. They can immediately agree to a more building fortress. So that is really the mess we have in. Now on perhaps Libya, because when I just came from Tunis, Tunis is also the place where the UNSMIL, the UN mission dealing with Libya, is placed. Also a lot of the groups who cannot be in Tripolis are in Tunis. And so how is this? Because as you rightly said, there are a lot of people who die already in Libya, if you are a migrant or a refugee, because everybody, there is basically no functioning state. And so I think it also is linked to the, I think the headline Saving Lives in the Mediterranean, that it's good to look for a political solution to this chaos and terror in Libya. And I hope very much that the EU will continue under the leadership of the United Nations to build on that. And what we have today is an agreement, at least from the two groups, to start forming a government. But we are far away, I have to say, than to say it will be good now, because like all the Gaddafi supporters perhaps have not been consulted at all. And the militias and also the smugglers will fight that it continues the business they have. But I think that, for example, would saving life on the, in the Libyan side if there is more a state with ministries and perhaps also border control. And then another plan of the European Union is, because we have, of course, a lot of attention by the public media in Europe and by civil society in Europe, who do not want to see all these dead bodies and all the people suffering so much. So there's an intention also by the political level to actually create a kind of symbolic borders to the European Union in the south of the neighboring countries. There is, for example, a plan to build a huge European asylum center in Niger. I hope not Nigeria, it's Niger, yeah? I mean, look at the human rights situation there. So nobody answers the question, what should that be? Should this be an asylum center where you select who is a refugee and who should go back? Who controls this? The same controlling the borders in the south of Libya. What for? Of course we have to fight human trafficking, yes. But the intention is perhaps more, what I see, to keep the refugees out. And my final thing, it relates a little bit what you have asked from the US. I mean, smuggling and trafficking in human beings is not the same, so there are different issues. But on the fighting human trafficking, the European Union is evaluating its whole policy in 2016, how to fight human trafficking within the EU, but also in its external borders. And perhaps that's a way where your experience from the United States could feed in. Okay, so far from me. Thank you.
Barbara, thank you very much indeed. You are, as you say, a politician, elected representative. You work for us, so maybe I can kick off. I heard you ask for a permanent search and rescue mission. You want, quite correctly, a political solution and stability in Libya. You're asking for greater openness to refugee flows and action to address human trafficking, which of course none of us would argue with. However, I mean, where is the political leverage? I mean, what is going to unlock political capital, public support to make those kinds of things happen, particularly a permanent search and rescue mission? And I mean, it's a wonderful aspiration, a great ideal. I don't think anyone in the room is going to disagree, but as a member of our European Parliament, I mean, what can you do personally to get the political capital behind you to make that happen, and how can we help you?
Well, personally, given the dimension of the problem, you can't do not much. So what I can do as a parliamentarian is I can ask for information which is not on the table. For example, I ask questions. Now they have the Khartoum process, where the European Union works closely together with governments of Eritrea, of Sudan, of South Sudan, of Egypt, to questions of management of migration flows and fighting terrorism. And my personal answer is, then what do you mean? Because these consultations end up that we help Egypt to train the police, that we help South Sudan to hinder actually people to flee. So that is, for example, one thing, the scrutiny of the EU by the Parliament, what I can do. And then with Frontex is the same. Now with the new decisions, Frontex will get so much more money. And what do they do with? The main focus is to help to deport people back in huge quantities and as quick as possible outside of the European Union. So at least the Green Group is the sixth smallest in the European Parliament, because after the elections it went to the right and to the extreme right. We can only try to influence the debate and represent those of the European population who do not want this. And interestingly, from the political view, those of you who are in Germany, you can clearly see that those who carry power, like the Conservative Party here, and I'm from the south, the Bavarians, that for the political leadership it's very difficult if there is a shift. Now we have a shift coming from our Chancellor to say we have to accept and we have to do it, but those who are right of her or not such liberal conservatives, they cannot sell this to their electorate. So when you are used for tens of years, decades of years to say, vote for me, I protect you, the foreigner is a danger, then it's very difficult to switch. And you see this, what is the British saying? You know better. I mean, or if you're in France, what do you discuss in the parliament if you have a Front National who thinks that each foreigner is a kind of a parasite to the French society. So it is difficult in the political sphere, but clearly I have to say from the Commission side there is a shift in policy, which is a little bit better. But the Commission is a kind of the ministries, I would say, in the national context, but it's not complete. So we have to be alarmed as individuals, and we need civil society, and we need investigative journalism, particularly to bring in information. What does this policy mean? And do we have examples where it's not functioning? Because I tried hard that we have a Frontex, that they are only allowed to do missions, actually, when they invite independent observers, like from NGOs and so on. Completely failure. I couldn't get that in. And so we depend on a civil society to critique them. Yeah, I think that is personally more. I think really the dimension is huge. I actually think, let me just say this because I'm very glad, today a decision was taken that 4 NGOs from Tunisia will receive the Nobel Peace Prize this year. And I think that's very good. I mean, they get it for that their country is not going back to dictatorship again at a crucial moment some years ago, but also it reflects that civil society in those countries, also Libya and also in Tunisia, that they fight and that there is a dignified country. And also the Tunisian government, I have to say, refuses that the Europeans want to send back a third national. So I think all of us in civil society
very, very good. Thank you very much.
Support.
Well, lots of support for you in the room. If anyone can get the Wi-Fi to work, you can tweet that Barbara's kindly offering to put the questions to those in power we want to get answers to. And on the subject of questions, are there any in the room? So yes, sir, here, there's a microphone coming at you.
I'm a master's student from Copenhagen University, and I was interested, Erdogan was in Brussels in the last days. Which is the position between Turkey and Europe? And Turkey is a difficult country. And what are doing humanitarians apart from all the camps in Turkey for the refugees and migrants passing through Turkey?
Thank you. Let's take another question. Yes, right over there.
Tankard Stöbe, MSF. I'm just from one of these rescue ship Dignity for weeks. I would just add a little dimension because sort of there's sometimes the false picture here in Europe that they come with the boats, the refugees, and then they have refugee or migrant or smugglers in front of their head. And I think for the refugees it's clear. Yeah, the Somalis, the Syrians, they all get refugee status once they survive and come to Europe. The smuggler end up in jail if they can figure out who they are and if they are on the boats. But what I would like to sort of briefly point out is the big number of West Africans who come via Libya trying to make it to Europe, because usually they are said, well, you know, you have no crisis in your country, why do you leave? And the stories quite often are, these are unaccompanied minors, they are small sort of children, 10, 12, 15 years old. They're usually sort of the fifth or sixth child of the family. They realize themselves that staying with their family, the family has no chance and they have no chance. So they decide to leave the family without even telling them because they wouldn't let them go. And then they work themselves sort of from Ghana, Nigeria, all the way, sort of working, crossing the next border. And then in the end, ending up in Libya where they are tortured, slave working, getting rid of all their sort of passports and money. So they can't even go back home. Yeah? So they're forced to go on those rubber boats, if they like it or not, to go to Europe. And sort of those stories made very clear to me. It's very difficult to find out. The country of origin doesn't tell much. Yeah? So you really have to dig down into each individual story to find out what's their reason to leave their countries. And so we should not get into this false distinction between refugees and migrants. Thank you.
Thank you for adding that. Yeah. Yes, thank you for that very important dimension. There's a question here and then here. So, or in fairness to you, why don't we start here and then we'll go.
Thank you. My name is Joy, also a student at the University of Copenhagen. I was wondering, I think you touched upon it already to some degree. There are a lot of individuals who would like to help. They've seen on the media stories and a lot of initiatives of individuals going themselves down to Lesbos, probably also Italian islands, trying to help. I myself am Dutch, and what I hear from the Dutch government is that they're trying to discourage initiatives like taking people in their homes because of this idea that individuals don't have the expertise to be able to deal with this. What do you think is the role of individuals in a situation?
Excellent question. Let's go up here and then we'll answer these. Maybe take two more.
Hello, I'm Caroline from MSF. I'd like to thank everyone for the presentation, and it's exactly my point is on what the young lady has just said. I think because you asked what humanitarians were actually doing apart from setting up refugee camp. I think this crisis is not, and linking it to the title of the Congress, is not a failure of the humanitarian system. It's a failure of citizenship, and it's a failure of the link between nation state and citizens. And collectively, we all failed, not humanitarians, but citizens. And what should we do, or what could we do? Well, we have the chance to actually live in democracies. And that's exactly the opportunity which we should actually take, is basically hold political responsible for what they actually signed for. I'm living in Geneva. Switzerland has signed all the possible conventions that exist on human rights, protection, and so on. It's a territory that doesn't have any connection to the sea, and therefore they're using Dublin as, I mean, for them it's a magic card, because everyone that set a foot in Switzerland is actually sent back, because it's impossible to first put a foot in Switzerland if you didn't put a foot somewhere else before, Italy, Greece, or wherever. And second, now that its citizens decided, Swiss citizens voted 2 years ago the denial of asking for asylum in Swiss embassies abroad, That's it. I mean, and for me, it's a bit like, instead of asking what humanitarians are actually doing apart from setting up camps, what are we all as citizens in European countries doing?
I think there was one more question. Yeah, great, thank you.
Two things. First of all, I would just like to. It's been in the whole debate for a while to point out that maybe we cannot all the time refer to the people coming as refugees, because they're a lot more, and everyone I've met doesn't really appreciate being called a refugee all the time. And with regards to what you just, the previous lady who just spoke said, I partially agree. But what I've been asking myself in the last couple of weeks and months is where, like, obviously humanitarian aid organizations are facilitators between civil society and states and all that, and there seems to have been no forecast whatsoever of what happened over the summer, and I wonder if that is because there is a lack of communication with the people in camps in Yemen, in Turkey, in Lebanon. That, I don't know, because I feel if it's not as if 100,000 people just suddenly one morning woke up this summer and decided to go, but they planned this, and there is humanitarian organizations in the field there, and if I wonder what's happening there for them to not have been able to forecast this in any way.
Thank you very much. Aurélie, maybe we can come to you on these two questions, forecasting refugee flows and how is it possible to work on this issue inside Turkey?
Yes, and I would also like to answer to the role of citizens and the activists in Lesbos, because we are directly working with them, so I have also something to say about that. So Turkey, yes, I think it's... Of course, and we saw that this week, the European Union has been focusing on Turkey as one source of the problem, because people transit through Turkey. It's not only people who depart from there, who were in camps and decide to go to Europe. There are organizations working in Turkey. There are lots of people even providing assistance before people depart, before they take the boat. Local organizations, a lot of grassroots organizations. We have been looking as well as the situation before people depart. But it's dangerous to make a link between the lack of humanitarian assistance and this journey, because it's not always connected. Of course, the situation in camps influences the decision that people want to leave, because people will ask information, how is the situation in the camp, and might decide that it's not good enough and they want to try another way. We don't see so many people who are departing directly from camps, who have been staying for years in camps and then decide to go to Europe, because most of the time, actually, the people in the camps, they are the most vulnerable. They are those without the money to pay the trip, and after a few years in the camps, they don't have any resources anymore to go somewhere else. So clearly, of course, humanitarian assistance is always needed in camps, but it cannot be a migration management tool. I mean, people who decide to take those journeys, they do it for many different reasons. They all have individual stories. It's for family reunification. It's because they have education. They know they can find a job in Europe. They have been in Europe before. They have connections. They know the language. So it's much more complicated than just the lack of assistance in one place that push people to go to another place. On the forecast, well, we were prepared. I mean, we knew that the number of people who would come would increase. I think everybody was surprised of the extent of the increase, because if you compare last year and this year, I mean, there is a huge increase. We were prepared as MSF to have more people coming through Greece than last year, especially because of the border logic and the fact that countries close to Libya has imposed visas on Syrian refugees. So Syrian refugees were not able to fly anymore to countries close to Libya, such as Egypt, Algeria, Tunisia. So that makes their trip to Libya much more difficult. So now they have chosen to take the trip between Turkey and Greece. But for sure, the numbers, it's directly linked with the fact that we have a global displacement crisis. We have 60 million people that are displaced in the world, and what we have seen in Europe is just a tiny part of this global displacement crisis. For the role of individuals, I think that's something that is clearly influential, and especially because, as we have discussed, most of these issues are political issues. They are very politicized. Even assistance in Europe is politicized. And I think, as Barbara said, we can challenge those policies through elections, but also through our own actions. And I think there were some positive developments in the last months, that we have seen much more people actually questioning. And especially here in Germany, I think the images of people welcoming refugees in train stations were quite strong. And the fact that we have individuals also helping for their own account in the Greek islands is also very very important, because it gives a different story to a different version to the story. And also because there are people that are transiting, that stay only a few days, I think there are very good actions that can be implemented by individuals. And the experience we have in Lesbos, and for example, is very positive. We have very good collaboration with these activists who are organizing themselves and providing assistance.
Alessandra, your movement, the Red Cross, Red Crescent movement, is entirely about, of course, volunteerism, promoting volunteering. These spontaneous, generous, kind-hearted people, I meet them in Calais all the time. Are they helping, or are they getting in the way?
I have to explain a little bit how it is to be a Red Cross volunteer. Red Cross is an ideological movement. We have 7 principles, and the action are guided by these 7 principles. If you agree, you are in. If you are not agree, you cannot stay. Okay, because the action is not following our rules. So usually, volunteer to become a volunteer, you have a training. What we have seen that working with migrants, but generally speaking, working with people that are in need is voluntary consuming. We lose volunteer if we don't pay enough attention in the training in how to communicate it, how to debrief, because the intense feeling that she was talking before, when people arrive on the boat, but are the same when people arrive in the harbor, the migrants that instead to say thank you, say no. Because there are also migrants that say, no, I don't want to stay here in Italy, I want to move. So this feeling made difficult to work with migrants or the other vulnerable people. So we needed to work a lot. So I say all this to say it's difficult for us to upset someone that as an individual, not trained, not with a Red Cross uniform, could help. But they can help trying to change the society, trying to avoid to support or not to see some television program in which the information are given from a strange point of view. They can help us to share the right information about the migration flow. They can vote. We are in a democracy. That's the best way.
Thank you, Alessandra. And finally, Barbara, the European refugee crisis is a failure of citizenship, very briefly. Like really briefly.
Of course, we don't limit that the money goes around in the world. We don't limit the goods. We only limit labor force and people. Of course, I agree with you. I don't think, but it is now, if you look into the different policies we have in the European Union, of course we try, for example, to do visa liberations with countries from West Balkans. At the same time, we send back the refugees. So it's a contradiction in itself. But I think we should really come to a policy where we have, I would not say open borders, but borders who can be crossed easily. And for refugees, because they need protection, and the other thing what we don't have on a European level, we also need forms of flexible migration. Because in the European continent, we don't have this thinking that nowadays, in this stage of globalization, migration is temporary. It's not like yet you move from Bavaria to Latin America and stay there forever. And we don't answer those trends. Therefore, we pressure people, like also perhaps people from Western Africa, who may have not an individual oppression from the government or something, but the need to earn money, and we don't offer this. And there's a gap because the economic think tanks, they all tell the European Union, you have to organize labor migration, and we still don't do this on the political level.
That's brief for a politician. Thank you very much. Well done. No, thank you sincerely. I know that you will all agree, ladies and gentlemen, that the final word should be with Ameen. Ameen, I know you want to say something about how you see the current refugee crisis and what could be done, but you have in front of you the future leaders of the humanitarian, the aid and development, I want to say business, and that's certainly the wrong word, the sector, they call it, and I know they're a charming looking lot who will go far. Tell us something about how you see this current crisis, and what is it that you want from this future humanitarian community? How could we be better in the work that we might do in the future?
Thank you. First, I want to thank everybody for everything, and I think just if you continue what you do something very great for a lot of people, and we thank you all. And just, I think if you, in some point, like if you make control with the government for the camping or something like this, it will be perfect. If we can go to this point, it will be very great. It will be something very nice. Thank you all for everything and for all support for all the refugees or all the people or everything. Thank you a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm afraid we can carry on outside, but we do have to stop so you can get to the next item. So on our behalf, let's thank our panel. Thank you very much indeed.